Welcome back, folks. We are here once more. This time back in Fort Collins, back from Seek, in a different house, in my house.
In my house.
And Brent's house.
Not my house.
Not his house.
No.
But this is the Purgatorial Podcast, episode 003. Probably. And
Hopefully.
Here with a very special announcement about today's episode is one Mr. Brent J. Lemieux.
That's not my name. Anyways, so we have a special guest with us today. This is, we have with us Ryan Ash. He's been a good friend of mine for a while. We were actually in seminary together back in 2012, 2013.
Back in the day.
Yeah, so we've been friends for quite a while. Yeah, so I guess we'll just kind of get started, and we were going to, I don't know. So I guess just Ryan, where, I don't.
All right, so basically, don't mean to take over.
Take over, please.
Yeah. But,
Save this episode quick.
I think it's good for the audience to kind of get to know you a little bit. So, kind of going off of a question that we've all answered, who are you and who are you today?
Oh boy. Well, I grew up in Fort Collins, cradle Catholic, not super into my faith, kind of learned more about the faith and learned to love the faith when I was a freshman at CSU. Did focus, spent a year in the seminary, and then graduated from CSU. And now I am a graduate student at the University of Illinois, and I'm studying chemistry, and that's pretty much where I am now. So
Nice. And kind of going off of that, where do you want to go?
Well, I guess the ultimate goal, I want to be in heaven, but
That's what we said too.
yeah, that's, I mean, honestly, what is the end goal for the Christian, right? You have to have all those things in mind, but I think that I can glorify God the best by using the talents He's given me for chemistry. I like teaching, so I've thought about being a teacher in chemistry. And the biggest thing is I just want to get back to Colorado. So either join a company and do research in chemistry, be a professor, something along those lines.
I think everyone's kind of end goal is always to end back up in Colorado.
Yes, for real.
Yeah. Once you move away, it's hard to actually you don't recognize how good it is here until you leave, and then it's like, man,
Dude, I don't want to leave.
I wasn't even raised in Colorado, and I never want to leave.
Yeah, it just kind of has that draw,
That southern draw.
but it's not southern. That's something that it misses.
The Western draw.
Yeah, the mountains.
The mountain draw.
The mountain draw. Yeah. Well, welcome. Thanks for coming on today.
thanks for having me.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a big podcast now, so obviously third episode we're having a guest, and yeah.
Just to clarify, we have 29 subscribers now, so we're pretty famous,
And
Making your way in the world.
Yeah.
yeah. So well,
What,
Nothing.
dude? What? Square up, bro. Just kidding. We have reached 134 views, dude. How exciting is that, bro? And only 50 of them have been me.
so I one time posted videos on YouTube, with my friends a long time ago, in middle school, and YouTube had a little bug where you could just refresh the screen and the views would just continuously go up. So you can make, even if you're the only one watching it, you can make it look like you had thousands of views. And yeah, it doesn't work like that anymore. So
What I want to know, though, is at what point does YouTube start cutting us checks,
that's a good point.
That's the main reason you're doing this, right?
Yeah.
Probably
Make
200
It's
views. Huh?
we're doing this to make a living. I want to quit my job and be a podcaster
Go
or a
chicken.
YouTuber.
Yeah, Ryan wants to be a chicken
Yeah.
connoisseur.
Chicken connoisseur.
Yeah.
How
Well-
many subscribers until the face reveal?
Ooh.
We're,
What's the
we're
face
supposed to
reveal?
do the face reveal of the last video.
What is a face reveal?
You just show up on the camera and you
Oh,
put your face
do a
up
video?
there. Yeah.
Normally people are anonymous and they're hidden, and then you do videos, and then finally you're revealed and people get to see what you look like.
But we're going to show our picture on the last video with our shaved heads.
Yeah, by the
and
time people
mustaches.
hear this, they should have already seen our faces.
Yeah.
Never mind. No, I'm giving away your tricks.
I didn't know that was like a secret thing that you had to do.
Huh.
Don't
It's
show
just
your
it was
face.
a joke.
Yeah.
Don't worry.
I mean, you're sharing it with your mom, so that was
She
just
knows, she knows what my face looks like.
Yeah. Well, I think we should kind of move into a little bit of the deeper content. And so I guess one question I have for you, Ryan, is, you moved away from Ram Catholic community, a community that we all like cherish and love. And it's something that really has helped us all grow and challenged us in unique ways. And so what has it been like moving away from that community?
No, it was really tough the first couple years away. Like you probably have heard from a lot of people, either like at Seek or people graduating. You go kind of like out into the world. You go to a new place, and there are a lot of people that aren't Catholic, don't care about the faith, and there's not like as big of a community to build you up and keep you accountable for being a faithful Catholic. So I had it a little bit easier because I went to another university where there's a really cool Newman Center. And so I was able to meet some people initially, but it's a little bit different, graduate student, undergraduate kind of like dynamic. And when you're working or, in a lab a lot, you don't have very much time to spend with other students. And so you're kind of a little more isolated. And that makes it pretty easy to, morally start declining, and also, to let your prayer life slip, to start, letting the world kind of creep into your life. And so, it was pretty tough at first dealing with all those things. So,
Have you found any, how have you built up community, or have you found a community that you hang out with and keeps you accountable now?
say that again. Sorry.
Have you found a community, a community that you hang out with, people that you hang out with that keep you accountable and help keep you holy and boost you up?
Yeah. In a way, yes, but not as great as the Ram Catholic community was. So I yeah. When you're in undergrad, you go on a Ram Awakening retreat, you go on Seek, you go on other retreats, or you just kind of hang out in the church. And you can have a lot of time to build friendships with other people, and the more and more time you spend with somebody, the more and more that you can kind of people can tell who you are. You can kind of share things that are a little more personal, and that kind of helps build the accountability kind of thing. And right now I work 8 to 10 hours a day in a lab, a lot of times or more, and so I don't really get that great time to be able to spend at the Newman Center. And so it's a little bit harder that way, but I'm part of a Bible study, and the guys there are faithful Catholics. We try to build each other up, but it's still really not the same as a friend that you knew in college, when you get to spend a whole bunch of time together and you really know each other. So
Yeah.
So, in you guys' eyes, because both of you are working right now, what do you guys feel like is the biggest struggle for you in kind of, outside of the community? Or something that maybe that you're facing now that will also, that struggle will also translate once you leave, Fort Collins or whatever it may be?
I think for me, one of the biggest struggles is being a witness of the faith in a very secular environment. Being at work, there's been numerous times where people have spoken up, talking about birth control, for example, or abortion or something like that, delving into these deep topics. But there's been a couple of times where I don't know how it came up, but talking about birth control, and I stood up and I was like, I don't think birth control is right in any situation, in any case, and I think you have to kind of be careful in those situations too, because you don't want to kind of separate yourself, because you still want to have that opportunity to be able to talk with people and to talk about the faith on kind of lower key, levels. But like in every situation, you still have to stand up for the faith, and you still have to defend the faith. So I think that's one of the hardest things, like working in a secular environment, is like standing up for the faith.
Yeah, I feel that 100%. For me, I've worked in a slightly different environment than you for pretty much my whole working career. I've pretty much worked in shop environments and like on crews with a bunch of different like other men. And as you guys could, expect, it's kind of like a locker room kind of vibe. And so for me, it's kind of hard to just like hold myself to the high standards that I should, the high moral standards that I should, when all around me is like just this like testosterone like overload where guys are just kind of being crazy and like acting like high schoolers, even though they're like in their 40s or 50s or 60s. Like, it's just a different environment in a shop. It's a different environment on a crew. And so I guess for me, like, yeah, just trying not to fall into like just talking about women the whole time, or like, not that like talking about women is a bad thing, but just like the way that they do it, the way that it happens a lot of times, isn't the best, or like, yeah, I'd say that's the toughest thing for me. Is just to try to be like, live as a man of Christ when you're living among these, or when you're working among these guys who don't value that whatsoever. And they have a very secular view of masculinity, where like the only thing that matters is like, looking tough and getting girls. And like, that's all they really seem to care about. But I guess really, if you can gain the respect of the guys, you can kind of open up to them and they'll still respect you. It's just kind of a balancing act of gaining their respect and not losing your values and your morals. So
yeah, I definitely think those are really, really good points. I think especially in an environment where no one really cares about the faith like whatsoever, or anyone else's religion, like they disregard it. I think that the biggest thing that you can do is being yourself and like not allowing yourself to change. I think that's the hardest part, especially in like an environment where it's testosterone. It's like really like man filled. It's like, you want to get your hands dirty, you want to do this, you want to do that, and then those kind of things creep up on you.
Yeah. And
like it can be low key and it can be really little, but you have to kind of watch yourself, and I think that's another part of like accountability.
Right. Well, and because it's happened in the past where like maybe you let something slip out that you shouldn't have, and then you try to hold somebody accountable later, and they're like, "Oh, but dude, you said this one time." And like they'll remember that stuff if you try to call them out. They're like, "Hey, but you did this one time." So like what I did wasn't that bad. It was similar. And so like you have to be pretty careful about like what you say or how you act, or just like what you do, because it's hard to take that back. You can't take it back in that environment. So,
and I think even looking at that from like a college student level, going to, let's say you go to parties, and right, you want to be this great example for everyone. Like you're like, I'm living a like Christ-like life, but then you go to a party, and this guy who you're trying to get to go to mass for the first time in a year, and he sees you there, and then later on you're trying to have a conversation that's like the same way. So I don't necessarily see what I'm living wrong if you say that you're living Christ-like and you're able to do the same things. Not saying that you can't participate in parties in like a good way, but it's just kind of finding a balance and really being able to challenge yourself. But
I think it's really easy in our culture, and I think that it's even honestly human nature to like just want to like fit in, so like it's really easy to like lose yourself in those situations and want to like just conform to society and like fall into that kind of bad talk, those bad actions, just for the sake of like fitting in,
Something that that also happens to me that is a little bit on the other side of that is I notice kind of my group members. I'm in a lab and I am with group members who think so contrarily to the faith. Like I have one. I have a lot of women in my group, and most of them are pretty feminist. And one of them says she never wants to have a son because she doesn't want to contribute to the patriarchy, which is like I sit there and I'm like, oh, wow, that's very interesting. And then I have another woman in my group who's transgender. She wants to go by masculine pronouns and she wants to be called like a male's name. And it's really hard for me not to become cynical at those things, just because I'm convinced of like the truth of the gospel, and like I want to help them, but at the same time I can become so embittered by the way that they act that and just like reject it entirely, that I try to it saddens me such that to try to just like deal with it, I just make fun of it, and I like do other things like that and try to hide kind of like the sadness that I feel for kind of like the life that they're living. So I find it really easy to get cynical too when you're kind of around people that are against the gospel. So
yeah, which I mean I feel that too. Sometimes I get cynical. Sometimes I get like actually angry, and like I feel like both of those responses are like very flawed. You know what I mean? Because like it doesn't lead them to the gospel in any way. Yeah. But it's the easiest thing to do, and it's kind of natural to do, I feel like. But sometimes what we're called to do is to not follow our instincts, I guess, and to kind of push back against what feels like it'd be easiest. But I feel that it's hard.
I mean, there is such a thing as righteous anger when, like, Jesus took took cords and braided them together and made a whip. Like, very, he was very methodical, and he knew exactly what he was doing, and he turned over the tables, and he was angry that people were profaning the temple. But yeah, at the same time, it can be righteously angry to think that somebody's doing an injustice to somebody, somebody's doing an injustice to God, other things, but there's you can either take that out on the person and be angry at the person, or you can be angry to try to see an injustice committed and want to use that emotion to convert the person to God and use that as like a driving force. But yeah, very the two ways that you can do those are pretty opposed to each other.
Yeah. It's a fine line to walk for sure.
Yeah.
But I also think just the amount of difference that you can make in someone's life can be amazing just by showing a little positivity towards them. Like, even though these people that you deal with, like the transgender person, I know when we were riding to Seek, there was some individuals on the bus that I'm just okay, can this be over? But if you were just to show those people just the slightest bit of kindness, and even though you're not condoning what they do or saying that you disagree with what they do, if you show them kindness, you could really show Christ to them in their lives just through that little action.
Well, I definitely think if you're living such a Christ-like life and you are professing the faith in the way that you live, and maybe I feel like in a way you're very you can be very vocal about your own faith. People know that you're Catholic. I know within all of us, it's that little act of kindness can not only change their day, their life, but their view on Catholics. And I think oftentimes there's so many people that identify as Catholic, and then they'll go out and say or do something that is not very Christian-like, and then you get kind of a bad rep. And so showing that little bit of kindness can kind of battle that in and of itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think in our society too, it's really easy to blur the lines between like disagreeing with what someone does and like disagreeing with them as a person, you know? I think that's a big issue in our society today. So even though you disagree with this person wanting to be transgendered or whatever, like you still love them. You don't love them because they're transgendered, but you still love them as a person, as a child of God. And it kind of reminds me of when we went to Vigil Praise, you know, and Father Ryan O'Neill gave the homily, and he was like, I don't love homosexuality, but I love people who are homosexual. You know, I don't love.
You better word this one right, because I'm one time.
I don't love the sin of masturbation, but I love people who masturbate. He actually said that, which is weird, but it's true. Like, I think as Catholics, like, we kind of get that bad rap of like, we judge people, you know? I mean, not really. Like, we love you for who you are. I think we have a right to judge the actions that you do, because we know that there is a law, a moral law that we abide by. So we do have a right to judge your actions. We can't condemn you to hell because of your actions, but like, we know that what you're doing is wrong, but we still love you, you know?
Yeah. The hate the sinner, love the sin. Classic.
Yeah.
But because what is it loving to, you know, to see somebody commit an action that, you know, is sinful, and, you know that they're putting their soul in danger and still refuse, you know, like not do anything about it. It depends on, like, you can't see, you know, not every person you're going to be able to tell them, you know, like, you know, what you're doing is wrong and have them accept it. But if you tell a good friend, like, look, I care about you, and that's why I'm telling you this. I don't, you know, this is hurting you. Just, you know, you can't do this. You know, if they're Christian, you're in danger of, you know, if you keep doing this, you're in danger of, you know, losing God. And I don't
losing your soul,
losing God eternally, going to hell. And so the most loving thing you can do is try to steer people away from that. So.
Yeah, I definitely think in terms of like the bigger picture, like actually, like just take a second and think about like eternally. And I think oftentimes we can get kind of caught up in like today, now, like this world, but it's like like forever. Like that is a long time. And sometimes like walking people through that, like with them, like, and kind of realizing like what they could lose can go a far way.
Yeah. That made me think just now, like, I feel like the longest punishment that I've ever faced is probably a month. Like, hey, you're grounded for a month or something like that. And like, I think it's easy for us sometimes to kind of dismiss the idea of hell, because it's like every punishment that we've ever faced on this earth, I mean, unless if you're facing like life in prison or something like that, which most of us are not. Like, it's...
Shout out to the people who are watching the podcast in prison.
Yeah, I mean, if you are, I'm praying for you.
Yeah, we love you.
You know, but for most of us, when we face a punishment, we can still say there's brighter days ahead. Like, oh, this sucks right now, but it's going to get better. But, like, hell, it's not getting better. Like, that's the thing that I think it's so hard for us to wrap our mind around, because on this earth, we can't face that punishment. Ever. Because no matter what, we could always have better things on this earth. We could always face better times on this earth. But if you end up in hell, it's not getting better. And so I think it is important, like you said, to like wrap our minds around that and really be there for each other, so that, you know, we can steer each other away from that. Because I don't think we want that for ourselves, and we don't want that for our friends. We don't want that for anybody.
Right.
You know.
I heard kind of an interesting meditation where, you know, a guy was like, okay, imagine you had something that you really like, let's say like chocolate or like, you know, a beer or something like that. And you were able to, you know, you sat and you drank that. And then you had to, you know, drink 10 more beers. And you had to just like keep drinking them and drinking them and drinking them. No consequences of getting drunk, anything like that. But after a while, you're just going to get absolutely sick of the thing that you like. if you have to do that over and over and over again. So if you eternally consume like one particular, like thing like that, and you're going to hate it for a really long time, just think about something that you don't like and having to, having to put up for that for forever. So
Wow.
it's, I don't know, that kind of got me thinking a little bit, like, oh man. And back in the olden days, one of the main things that
The olden days.
The lay people were told a lot of times to meditate on the four last things: heaven, hell, or death, judgment, heaven, and hell. And that really, I think, puts your life in perspective, makes you think how you want to live. I'm going to die, it could be this day, and I'm going to go before the judgment seat of God, and depending on how I live, I can either have two outcomes. And if that's for every single person, it really puts life into perspective. Highly recommend. So.
Yeah. Freaky stuff, man. This always makes me scared. Scared
Not
to
scared.
I mean,
Hopeful.
It makes me scared.
I'm not gonna lie, dude. It's scary stuff to think about hell. I don't want to go there. I mean, of course I'm hopeful for heaven, but I am scared of hell. I'm scared of hell.
I'm not gonna lie. Obviously, our podcast is called the Purgatorial.
Yeah.
Purgatory sounds terrifying.
Yeah.
Like, I think, obviously, I want to shoot for heaven, right? But purgatory just sounds like literally terrible.
Yeah. I mean, purgatory is like the hardest thing that you could ever go through.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, literally the only reason you're there is to get rid of your vices and to get rid of your hang-ups, which like sucks. Like that's the worst thing that you could go through. It's terrible to do on this earth. I can't imagine doing it in this wherever purgatory is. I don't know.
One time, I don't know if this is a true story, but I heard it from somewhere. It's definitely not a true story. But this person had a vision that an angel was talking to this guy and was like, you can either, you're going to die within a year, or you can go to purgatory now for a day. And the guy was like, I would rather not die in a year, a lot of intense suffering within that year. So he chose the day. And then the angel goes away, he's in purgatory, comes back down. The guy thought that his time was up, but it had only been a minute. And I was like, oh shoot. Yeah. Like that. All right. That's kind of scary.
Yeah.
Have you heard the story? I can't remember what parish this is in, but there was a priest that was saying mass, I believe, and had a holy soul in purgatory come and visit him and put their hands on the missal, and they were in flames, and the handprint that they put on the missal scorched the missal and left a scorched handprint inside of the missal. I can't remember where it is, but people can look it up. It's pretty easy to find, but yeah, that sounds like a pretty intense amount of suffering.
That's why I think the biggest thing, even realizing now, and you hear priests talk about it, is praying for the souls in purgatory, and because that's what they need. Mm-hmm. And kind of realizing that, shoot, that sounds scary, sounds hard, and oftentimes we can kind of overlook that, and we kind of have to put it into perspective of we should be praying for them every day, because if we make it there, we better hope that there's another Purgatorial 2 podcast out there praying for them every day,
right?
Praying for us. And yeah.
Something that I remember is on All Souls Day here at St. John the 23rd in Fort Collins, we had a Requiem Mass, a Latin extraordinary form Mass, and we did four A's Requiem, and it was a very beautiful thing. But during the homily, Father Dan McKelleran said that one of the biggest injustices that we can do is canonize a person when they die. He's we can never assume that they're in heaven until the church canonizes them, So ad perpetuum, we're praying for these souls, because if they're not in heaven, if they're, let me think if I say that right. If they're not in heaven, and we quit praying for them, like they have no one to pray for them. You know, they're just going to be in purgatory for the rest of eternity.
Right.
Because
They
the
can't
souls
pray
in
for
purgatory
themselves.
can't pray for themselves. Yeah.
Yeah. Don't forget about your relatives and the holy souls.
Yeah. He made a joke of like when his grandma died or something like that. Like he's just scared that like when he dies and like his grandma's not in purgatory and he meets her in purgatory or something, you know, and she. It's like you didn't pray for me. Like have to deal with the wrath of like his grandmother or something.
Yeah.
No one wants to deal with the wrath of a grandma.
No.
So pray for your grandma. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was trying to look up things on purgatory, but I'm not fast enough. Sorry.
Cool.
Purgatory's crazy. I did hear that there's no, what's the word? There's no something in purgatory. Despair, maybe? I forget what the word is. Like the souls in purgatory, they're at peace. Yeah, that's what it is. There's no despair because they're at peace, because they know they're going to heaven. So that's something that is kind of cool to me. Is that it's just like this peaceful suffering, which is like saintly, which is cool because I mean eventually they all will be saints, I suppose.
Yeah, they absolutely want to suffer because they want to see God.
Right.
And they know that it's, you know, like the main reason that we go to purgatory is because of the temporal, you know, like temporal causes of sin, that, you know, we have attachments, we have other things that we need to kind of shed off to be attached to God. But it's like, what's that one scripture passage? You know, going through a refiner's fire, something like that. So you gotta burn off a lot of impurities before you see God.
Yeah.
I think that can be a good reflection by itself. Reflecting on where you see your own imperfections and like in terms of like thinking about purgatory, like thinking about what it would take for you like to go through purgatory and like what would be like burned. I think that's something cool to reflect on.
Yeah. Well, because I mean, if you're trying to do things properly, you'd probably, like you said, you'd find the impurities and you'd burn them off in this life, so that you don't have to burn them off in purgatory. But I mean, that's a hard thing to do. But that's something I think that we should strive for, and we should be aware of our impurities that we do have.
Yeah, and it makes you appreciate the you know, the time that we have now to be able to like have acts of mortification that we can do. You know, like we can either make up for the temporal causes of sin now, or we can wait until purgatory. And yeah, like you were telling about that story with the one guy of, you know, like a year versus a day. A lot of saints talk about, you know, like, oh, how I wish I knew earlier, you know, the good and the importance of mortification and of like offering up suffering. So like,
Yeah, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, the like corporal works of mercy and stuff remove the stain of sin. Like they obviously don't remove sin itself, but like even after confession you still have the stain of sin on your soul. I'm pretty sure the corporal works of mercy and maybe some other works of mercy remove that stain slowly.
I think so. Yeah, practicing the corporal and spiritual works of mercy. Also, just prayer in general.
Yeah.
Offering up, you know, fasting. And then what was the other one? Oh yeah, and then indulgences is another big one. You have to. There are like prerequisites for indulgences actually working well, but yeah. And one of them is not being sold. So.
Not being sold?
Yeah, like you can't sell indulgences like the like the, you know,
yeah. Yeah. Don't sell indulgences. That's bad. Please don't do that.
Yeah.
If you give me $100, I'll let you out of purgatory.
Oh, cool. Okay, I'll consider it.
Well, yeah, it is that time, I think, folks. This has been fun. Honestly, Ryan, thanks for joining us.
Thank you guys for having me. It's good.
I think this has been productive. I think that we've kind of uncovered some important stuff within this. I don't know how long it's been, maybe 30 minutes, 45 minutes, however long it's been. But with that, we're going to let you guys go. We're going to let it ride. And we'll see you guys next time on the Purgatorial Podcast.